Please. Thank you, Madam Clerk. I'd like to welcome everybody to this hybrid meeting of Midland Council for Wednesday, September the 7th. It's very refreshing to see people in this chamber for a change after 2 years of pandemic. So welcome. It's really nice to see you. It's going to be a full agenda, I think. And so we'll get right to it. And I'll call this meeting to order and read the land acknowledgement. Town of Midland recognizes that it is located on land which is the traditional and treaty territory of the Anishinaabe people, now known as the Chippewa Tri-Council, comprised of Bosley First Nation, Rama First Nation, and the Georgina Island First Nation. This territory is within the Pre-Confederation Treaty 5 and Treaty 16, and included within the Williams Treaties of 1923. The town of Midland recognizes that it is located on land which is the traditional territory of the Huron-Wendat and the historic homelands of the Métis, and that our town is home to a large and diverse community of Indigenous peoples. I'd ask you to join me in a moment of silent reflection and perhaps consider those families and friends out in Saskatchewan who've been so tragically bereft of family members and friends. Please. Thank you very much. Last council, if there are any declarations of conflict of interest for this evening's meeting. Seeing none, if you recognize that there is a conflict, then please advise the clerk and she will provide you with the appropriate paperwork. Thank you. So we have a series of motions, the first being moved by Deputy Mayor Ross, seconded by Councillor Cunningham. The contents of the regular council agenda for September 7th, 2022 be approved as amended by adding the following item under section 12, reports and other items withdrawn from the consent agenda for council's consideration. Includes presentations by consultants regarding a report under consideration. Staff report CSR-2022-58, status report Bayport Village Phase 2 termination of purchases. Council, you have heard the motion. Any comments or questions? So I've got to remember to check the screen here. Seeing none, all those in favor? Thank you, that carries. Next, we have a motion by Councillor Main, seconded by Councillor Shevsky, that the items and related recommendations contained within the September 7th, 2022 consent agenda as consent items having been considered by council be adopted. Comments or questions with respect to the motion? Councillor Gordon.
I think just a quick note, I just got a text message from some viewers online. They're not able to hear any audio.
We'll just take a moment here and see if we can rectify that.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor.
I'm sorry, did somebody speak?
Yeah, over here.
Mr. Dunno.
I did receive a text from one of our staff and they do have audio on their end. So I'm not sure if it's a user experiencing those problems.
Thank you, Mr. Dunno. Mr. Flaris, does everything seem to be? It
could be on Roger's end, possibly if they're watching.
I see.
Seems good here.
Yeah, this staff is watching on Rogers as well. So
So it looks like it may be individual users issues. All right, then we'll continue. So I've read the motion into the record. Any comments or questions? Councillor Main.
Thank you. This is how I do it, right? I'm just getting confused. Just wanted to comment on the very interesting redistribution notice. The public is being asked to, if you want to provide commentary, to fill that out and provide that to the federal redistribution program. It's quite interesting. Obviously, there's big pushback on changing the name. I did kind of like that Penetanguishene and Couchiching are both Indigenous names. I think that's a very nice touch. But of course, Simcoe North is classic, and everyone has resonated with that for many decades. Almost, I believe, since Confederation. So it's quite interesting that the name would be even proposed to change. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further comments, questions? Councillor Gordon.
Thanks. I'd like to echo Councillor Main's comments about this. It has been the same since Confederation, and there's only a handful left in Canada that have remained untouched. The gerrymandering that occurs on a sort of decade by decade basis by the federal government sometimes has accompanied with name changes, as well as they, mess around with the boundaries. In this case, there's a combination of boundary changes as well as this name change. And while the boundary change may not mean much to folks in Midland, it does mean an awful lot, very likely to some of the people who probably aren't watching or listening, but they are paying attention in the South End. So from a naming perspective, I mean, clearly we can't come out swinging, just because it's Penetanguishene and Couchiching is the name, but is that name accurately reflective of the many communities that make up what's currently Simcoe North? So that's something for the residents to ponder and decide whether that's the new identity that you'd like the federal government to apply to you. You do have a short window to participate. And apparently, in speaking with MP Chambers, the input from residents is considered with far more weight than the input from MPs, which seems kind of, backwards to me. That's why we elect MPs, to be our voice and to carry weight on these discussions. But it's completely backwards when it comes to this change that happens, every 10 years. So if anything about this does bother you, or you'd like to have some input, please, you can visit the link on our agenda. I also have it on my website, but we're not supposed to promote that stuff. But you'll find it if you just go onto social media or search for this online, and there'll be an opportunity for a phone number and email where you can add your 2 cents worth about this change. Thank you.
Councillor McGinn.
I think the only thing that I'd like to add is that I would strongly suggest that people look up, what and why is it Simcoe? Because Simcoe is actually named after John Graves Simcoe, and perhaps take that history into consideration, and that's easy to look up. So it's John Graves, Graves Simcoe, and learn why it is that name exists, and and then please feel free to let people know exactly what it is that you feel and how you feel, and I would like to know why. That's all. It would be an interesting lesson to know why it is that people have the views they do about the name change. So if you wouldn't mind reaching out to me, it would help me learn a lot about you.
Thank you, Councillor. I think in this process, the consent agenda is basically, it's deemed that everybody has read the material under the consent agenda, and it's council information packages, which is correspondence and other things presented to council, as well as other reports and so on. And going through the consent agenda, it will be passed. And within that, there is basically a motion that says further correspondence from MP Adam Chambers dated August 30th, 2022, respecting boundary changes and name change proposal for Simcoe North. Council of the Town of Midland does not support the name change proposal to rename Simcoe North to Penetanguishene Couchiching, and that the riding continue to be known as Simcoe North. I should also correct something that was said earlier. It's the term gerrymandering is actually something that's misapplied to this. This process is absent politicians for a reason. It is made up of people from the public and the various walks of life. And there is a definite formula they go through, and they're looking at population and how population is changing within particular ridings. Some ridings will actually disappear. There are a number that will disappear. Others will have proposed name changes, and some will have boundary changes. In our case, if you look at the population allocation for that's arising out of a provincial allocation through the county and administered through the county, within the next 10 years, you'll see that boundary actually shift back, because the population growth in places like Springwater, Barrie, and so on will be such that we'll end up getting that. And here locally, we'll end up getting that boundary back, likely. But there is a reason they don't have politicians involved, and that's because they don't want to see gerrymandering. So with that, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion? Thank you. That carries. Next, we have a motion moved by Councillor Main, seconded by Councillor Olszewski, that items and related recommendations contained within the September 7th, 2022 consent agenda. We just passed that. I beg your pardon. Getting behind myself here. Next, it's moved by Councillor Prost, seconded by Councillor Gordon, that council resolve into the committee of the whole. Comments or questions with respect to the motion? Seeing none, all in favor? Thank you. That carries. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. I welcome everyone here to this evening. We'll move into the committee of the whole. We have no public meetings or hearings, but we do have a wonderful presentation. It's the fire department, Midland Fire Department's years of service medals, and I'll turn it over to Chief Ryan. Chief Ryan, thank you very much for yourself being here and all the firefighters, and we'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Ross. Your Worship, members of council, Mr. CAO, staff, members of the public, firefighters, I stand before you humbled and honored to present to 3 firefighters their exemplary fire service medals. This medal was created in 1985 by the federal government to bestow upon firefighters who have served 20 years or more in their communities. The object of the medal is characterized as firefighters who have good conduct, professionalism, dedication, and put others above themselves. So tonight we have 3 firefighters who would have received their medals 2 years ago, but during the pandemic, everything was on hold. So we are here tonight to present 3 medals. The first fire receiving his 20-year medal is firefighter Jeff Beauchamp. Jeff joined the fire department in April of 2000 and has served 22 years. Jeff serves as the secretary treasurer to the Midland Volunteer Firefighters Association and represents the volunteer firefighters on the Health and Safety Committee. Jeff has a passion for health and safety, the well-being of the firefighters within the department, and certainly making sure that the firefighters have a fair shake at what's entitled to them within the fire service. Firefighter Phil Kamen also joined the same time as firefighter Beauchamp. They both served 22 years. Firefighter Kamen is very passionate in training. He assists with volunteer recruitment training over the last number of years. And firefighter Kamen is one of our first volunteer firefighters to successfully complete the driver training on all of our apparatus and is currently providing that service to Midland Fire Department. Captain Doug Warge joined the Midland Fire Department in 2009 after serving with the Township Atini Fire Department and the Penetanguishene Fire Department. Doug serves as the president of Midland Professional Firefighters, and Doug is very passionate as well when it comes to the health and safety of the members of the fire department and is passionate about training and delivering service to our residents. Total, these 3 firefighters have provided over 60 years of service to their communities, but 57 years combined service to the residents of the town of Midland. Without hesitation, without fail, those 3 can guarantee you that they're coming to the fire hall to serve the residents of this municipality during storms, power outages, pandemics, you name it. They are there, not just for themselves, but also to serve the residents of this municipality. And I think that we're very fortunate in this municipality to have such a group of dedicated individuals who serve without question, without bias, without anything, the residents of this municipality. Your Worship, if you would like to join me and Deputy Chief Lowell, we make the presentations to the firefighters. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief Ryan, and congratulations to all recipients, and special thank you to all the great firefighters out there serving the town of Midland. Greatly appreciated. That's what makes this town so wonderful. So thank you so much. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda, and it's a deputation on short-term rental Airbnb residential residents concern, and we have Ms. Nelson to present to council. Ms. Nelson, I'll remind you that you have 10 minutes once you start, and that you may have a few questions from council after. Welcome to the chambers this evening. We'll just allow 1 second before you get started. A few of the fellas and sort of firefighters are heading out the door.
Is it in the right place? Okay. Are we ready?
I want to thank you very much for coming this evening. I appreciate it, your time, and it's never easy getting in front, but we're a friendly group here, and we appreciate you. We always like to hear from our residents, and thank you. I'll allow 10 minutes, and as I said, if you need, I can give you a 2-minute warning, and you're getting down to the end, but please stick around. Well, I'm sure we may have a few questions for you. So
Absolutely.
thank you so much for coming this evening. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Lainey Nelson, and I'm here to talk about the short-term rentals of under 30 days in the residential zones here in Midland. On the Airbnb website, it states that there are 533 stays in the town of Midland, none of which, to our knowledge, are regulated. For the past 2 years, we've been subjected to an Airbnb rental on our street and have come to learn that this home and those like it are known to the general public as ghost hotels. This property is being advertised in 2 separate places on Airbnb as number 1, a cottage, and number 2, an executive home. The ad further states that it houses up to 14 guests with 7 bedrooms, 5 baths, a pool and a hot tub. The rental rate ranges from $641 to over $1,000 per night. As a result, we have experienced extreme noise, loud music, shouting, and foul language coming from this property. On several occasions, it has been necessary to call the OPP to intervene on our behalf. Our street, which is zoned residential, is not in cottage country, but in the heart of Midland. The result is that we are being denied enjoyable and quiet use of our own homes on a very regular basis. We believe that rentals of this magnitude and for this many inhabitants should not be allowed on our street, and in fact in residential zones anywhere in the town of Midland. As you know, short-term rentals of under 30 days are not permitted in Ontario, with bylaws being adopted by the various municipalities in the province. We have researched and do not find any bylaw or bylaws as this relates to the town of Midland. We believe the time has come. In the township of Tiny, the municipality has created a system of licenses with various restrictions and regulations to curb these establishments from getting out of control. Also, our research has indicated that in Collingwood, outside of hotels and motels, short-term rentals are only allowed in residential zones as bed and breakfast establishments where the proprietor resides. In Wasaga Beach, the zoning bylaw only permits short-term accommodations of less than 30 days in zones designated as tourist commercial and tourist accommodation. Short-term rentals are not permitted in residential zones in Wasaga Beach. We recognize that short-term rentals will always be a part of the town of Midland. We ask that consideration be taken as to what is considered residential and what is considered tourist accommodation, such as that of Wasaga Beach. And we also agree with the bylaw relating to bed and breakfast establishments as set out by Collingwood. We are asking council and staff to come up with a made for Midland solution to prohibit short-term rentals of under 30 days in residential neighborhoods. As the popularity of Airbnbs grows, we as a municipality need to recognize that if we don't regulate or restrict these types of businesses, we could face more crimes such as theft and vandalism. As a result, there will be more discord from the permanent residents. Since these ghost hotels do not have a daily staff on site, the properties could become run down and in turn negatively impact their resale value as well as those on our street. We also recognize that this issue may not be addressed until the new term of council, but would like to know that the members of this council share our concerns and are committed to finding a solution. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very mumuch. Wonderful job.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. I think it's the short-term rental is one of those things we would hope never would come here. And I sit on county council, as does the mayor. And we hear it at other communities, but it really, we hoped it was, one of those things, but hopefully it never happens here in town. Obviously it is.
Yes.
So we need to address it. So I appreciate you coming this evening.
Thank
Any
you.
questions or comments? I'll go with Councillor Chesky, then Councillor Main, Councillor Gordon, and I'm sure to worship. And I apologize. I didn't look online here. There may be a couple. So we'll start with those three and we'll go from there.
Excuse me for a moment. I've asked Magdalena to come up because she
Sure.
lives directly behind this said property and she has more firsthand experience than I do as I live across the street.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, before we move forward, any information that staff wanted to provide before we get started, or we're fine? Okay, Councillor Olszewski, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know, a little hot on the mic. I just wanted to voice my support. I think Tiny Township, Penetang Machine, Wasaga, Collingwood have all beat us to this, and I think it's overdue for us to get some language around this, and unfortunately, it probably will be the next council, but I do want to voice my support.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Main?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Good to see you. Nice
you.
chatting with you the other day.
Thank you.
After we spoke, I was speaking to another resident who was mentioning something about Airbnb kind of regulating themselves. And obviously we were talking about the long-term solution is enacting the policies, going through the planning process, reviewing all the different policies, maybe even have a committee if it's an ad hoc or a task force or whatever with the incoming new term of council. In terms of short-term, if you have short-term rentals that are kind of in violation of the terms of Airbnb, is that a short-term solution where we reach out to Airbnb and you say, listen, your hosts are not following the rules? Because it sounds like that is maybe the quick win, a short-term solution on some of these issues, because they're trying to clean up their act and they're trying to move away from, the party houses and stuff like that. That looks bad on everybody in the short-term rental realm. So I was just curious if that is an avenue that may be possible. You've probably already reached out to them. Just would love to hear your thoughts on that. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you very much, sir. I have personally reached out to the Airbnb through a phone call, through email, and all I have been given back is just, we're working on it. We'll get back to you. We are sorry that you're going through such a event, but I haven't heard any resolution whatsoever. And in any case, within 3 to 4 days, I get an email saying that the case has not been closed without any kind of research or additional questions asked of me. So we've tried that route and unfortunately haven't been successful.
Councillor Gordon?
Thank you very much. I did enjoy our face-to-face chat about this, where we, really did a deep dive into the problems. This is going to be the second Airbnb complaint I think this council has received this term. The other one was over on the other side of Little Lake. And I can tell you from the AMO conferences, both the ones we go to in person and the past couple of years where it's been virtual, Airbnb is a host and a sponsor at the trade show as they kind of woo and try and work with municipalities to avoid being shut out, because of course their primary goal at the end of the day is revenue for both themselves and for their hosts. So this is a business, not some type of charity, right? And despite the very real, there's a lot of benefits to a well-run Airbnb home. Matter of fact, I'm bumping into them as I'm campaigning. The neighbors, when I go back and knock on the door, go, there's an Airbnb beside you? They aren't even aware of it. So clearly there's some well-run Airbnbs out there, or I'm using that, maybe we should just call it short-term rentals, because there's other platforms. But there's also some not well-run ones. And typically the ghost hotel ones, from what I'm finding out, and especially listening to the horrible stories that are happening, literally behind you and across from you, these are untenable situations that can't be allowed to continue. So the good news from my perspective, and this is something, I shared with you at the dining room table, is that we have, while we're waiting for the next council to form and hopefully build consensus to look towards a registry and moving to adopt some made in Midland solution of a bylaw, there is some short-term help. And it's something that I feel like it's a service delivery issue, and that Midland perhaps is failing you on. And it's the low-hanging fruit, and something I'd hope that this council, even though we're lame ducks, can get behind collegially tonight. And that's that we currently have property standards bylaws that would address the state of that residence across the street and behind you. And we also have noise bylaws that are in effect, I believe, 24/7. And there's also the criminal code where it's actually a criminal mischief offense to interfere with someone's lawful enjoyment of their property. Now that's the real hammer, and that's rarely used, but I can tell you from my old policing days, after 3 or 4 returns to a noisy party, somebody was going to either jail or, getting an elevated ticket. So we have a bylaw department. I think it's, maybe a shell of what it used to be, because I think we're just getting a new staffer on board, and we certainly have a new manager of bylaws, but they are empowered. They have the authority and the ticket books and a car with gasoline and Midland car keys to come out and not only investigate these offenses, but to lay the appropriate charges. And the question I have for bylaw tonight is, are these offenses found committing type offenses where bylaw would need to be working at 1 a.m. and go and see the lewd behavior and hear the foul language and the complaints that are experiencing? Do they have to find committing, or is this something that you can take the word of a complainant or watch a video captured on a phone and lay that charge after the fact? Because my concern is that we don't just push this off for the next council. If there's something we can and should be doing right now, I fully expect our bylaw department to flex their muscle, use carrot first, but not be afraid to use stick.
Thank you. We appreciate that. We do have a video, but it has been redacted, but it would be appreciated if the town council themselves could view it in private. It doesn't really show anything other than a fence and time from daytime till nighttime with unbelievable sounds. That's at your disposal.
Council Downer? A question, oh, sorry. Mr. Campbell, you care to comment, or Mr. Deneau? Or, sorry.
Thank you. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And in response to Councillor Gordon's question about bylaw, and certainly I want to make sure that all the residents are aware. We're aware of the property that you referenced, and we did do a search on the bylaw complaints made against the property. All were investigated. The owner of the property did comply with the investigation that was done by the bylaw officer. There were complaints around some property standards, some draining of the pool. I think the last one we received this year, and I think the only one was a noise complaint. So we did speak with the property owner on that case. So bylaw is investigating these, and to the extent that they can, they are, dealing with the homeowner and trying to make them understand. Is there a step further that we can take? I think that is something we should investigate, whether there's more teeth in our bylaw that we can apply. However, with a property of this standard, it may just become a standard that they'll build into their business model, if you like.
I don't understand what that means.
If the fine isn't very heavy, they'll just build it into the price.
At $1,000 a night, you need to put a
Correct.
pretty big fine.
Correct. So I do think, I think we all understand, and I do appreciate the sentiment you're offering here. There's no illusions that we think at some time we would have to look at an STR policy for Midland. We know there's an overwhelming majority of very responsible STR owners in Midland. There's no doubt. But we are a growing community, and we're a very attractive community. So there are obviously more people coming in. We're post-pandemic. So we certainly appreciate that. So it's not a surprise to us that we potentially look at this type of policy if council wishes us to do so. And your feedback is very much appreciated.
Thank you.
Councilor Downer?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for your presentation. I'm sorry you're going through this. I would definitely support working towards legislation to find a solution to this problem. So I am on side with you to find a solution. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Downer. Councilor McGinn?
Hello, I'm terribly sorry for your loss of enjoyment in your home. I read through and, the age of your children, and that's the part that personally really struck me. Having as many as I do, and then having loads of grandchildren. So I'm very sorry for that. I think that it would be a great idea for us to be in support of a policy forward and bylaw changes, and to look into the bylaws that we currently have to see if there's something we can do. my view on that and my reason for that is that rules are there to help when you're in non-compliance of them. The majority of people are compliant and have class and are good neighbors. And these are not neighbors. These are people who you're not going to be seeing a month from now. And not all visitors or are all people in short-term rentals disrespectful of their neighbors, but some are. And for that reason, that's why I believe we need to have a policy in place, not because we're against short-term rentals per se, but we're against ill-managed short-term rentals. That a party house is not our friends and family coming up from the city and staying in a neighbor's cottage. It's not being used in a way that is fitting of the neighborhood, and it's not fitting with me. So I will support what is necessary to be done in the short term and long term so that everybody has employment.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McGinn. I should have shared, I guess, we haven't had these meetings for a while. I do have a motion that comes out of deputation, and that's the deputation from Ms. Nelson regarding short-term rentals and Airbnb concerns be received for information, and that the matter be referred to staff to review bylaw and building code enforcements, and that staff undertake a review of short-term rental policies. I should have shared that, might have saved some of our conversation. I apologize. But I did have Councillor Gordon and then Mayor Strathern. You have a short comment?
Thank you. Just another comment, something else we discussed. I'm not sure if you know, but the health units have the power to, and apparently it's in the regulations, that pools and hot tubs at these effectively commercial, no longer residential pools and hot tubs. The health unit has the power to turn those into commercial pools and hot tubs, which means installing a landline. There's all kinds of things. I don't think you have to have a lifeguard, but there's a lot of onerous restrictions. And if you look at the Kawartha Health Unit, for example, they've taken a hard line and they're not inventing this stuff. It's right in their mandate, and it's really up to every health unit whether they want to take a line like that. But that can have a real negative impact on short-term rentals owners. So it's something I'd like, while the staff is considering Tiny's Township, perhaps, first of all, just Google this from Halliburton County. There's a whole bunch of hot tubs that have all had to be emptied and pools that aren't allowed to be used in these short-term rentals as a result. So I'd like us to take a holistic view, not just focusing on STRs and bad operators, but also on the overarching regulatory framework that really should fall into place to have a well-defined STR policy that rewards good operators and absolutely punishes and eventually prohibits the bad operators. So that balance is, I think what everybody would like to have in the end of this. And I certainly support that and look forward to being part of the conversation at the next council.
Thank you very much. That's a nice little carrot, because I believe that commercial enterprises are not allowed in residential zones. Correct me if I'm wrong.
You're right. Mayor Strathern.
There we go. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your presentation. That was very well done. You should maybe consider going into politics or public speaking. Yeah, you are. I like the fact that you've done your homework. I like the fact that you're looking at different solutions and through them distilling out a Made in Midland solution. I know that there in Midland, a number of, they're not Airbnbs, they're family cottages that they rent out to friends or relatives. It helps them to pay their tax bill. And over time, these places become actually the people who come there become part of the community. And they're responsible operators. And then you've got, on the other hand, something that you're contending with, and it seems like it's an irresponsible operator. And we need a system that is going to deal with them without, I hope, penalizing the people who are responsible, and it's just sort of a family affair. I think Tiny's bylaw was intended to achieve just that. There's, I think, some good takeaways from that. But in the meantime, you are correct. Commercial operations aren't allowed in residential, except under the home occupation bylaw. Within the home occupation bylaw, it states that if you are disturbing your neighbors through noise, light, vibration, and smell, etc., that then you're no longer allowed to practice, or at least you will be reminded, and then we'll move on from there. We have, actually, bylaw has been busy. They've responded to some of these things, and they went over to the building department. We're having a look at just exactly what's been done to that building to go from X number of bedrooms and baths when it was sold to what it is now. I understand that it may not be compliance there, and there'll be action taken. That's a first step. And we'll look to see how, as the deputy mayor has said, asking staff to look at how the existing framework can be applied to get some short-term relief. It depends upon the definitions in the zoning being tight enough that we can get enforcement on it. The idea of doing a ticket, it's probably about $150 fine. Now, if you keep doing that, it goes from that's a part one. It's called a part one. It escalates then to a part three. You're brought before a judge, and then the judge rules on what's appropriate, what's not. That takes a period of time to move through that, but we'll certainly take a look at those sorts of processes. The other process is injunctive relief. You go before a judge with lawyers, and you ask for the activity stop. I don't think we'll go there at this point in time, but we will look at enforcing the applicable bylaws that are in existence now, and if there are any deficiencies. I would ask that you provide the clerk with the various, in case this hasn't been captured, the various bylaws that you looked at, whether it's Collingwood's or Wasega's or Tiny's, and we can save people time in terms of doing the research, and they get back to us sooner. As you can see by the motion that's coming out of this, we are taking it seriously, and it's I'm kind of wishing that we'd looked at. I was hoping that this would not happen here, but clearly it has, and so we'll need to deal with it. And there's actually been 3 complaints that I'm aware of to council so far, not to council, but to the town, with very same sorts of issues. So thank you for bringing it forward. Sorry for your time with putting up with this sort of thing. To support the motion that's before us, and I hope that very early on in the next council we'll be able to come back with something that's workable. I suspect what will happen is we'll go to bring a recommendation forward and then maybe take it to the community, because of course there's other parties involved as well. So thank you for that, and I will support the motion.
Thank you very much for coming this evening. Great job. We appreciate your time, and it's never easy, but you did a wonderful job. So thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you. So I have a motion moved by Councillor Main, second by Councillor Cunningham, that the deputation from Ms. Nelson regarding short-term rentals and Airbnb concerns be received for information, and that the matter be referred to staff to review bylaws and building code enforcement, and that staff undertake a review of short-term rental policies. Any questions or comments with regards to this item? All those in favor? So carried. Thank you so much. First steps on its way. So hopefully many to come. Next up, we have reports and other items withdrawn from the consent agenda. And it's 12.1. It's the 2022 AMO conference delegation update. I see that it has Mayor Strathern to provide a verbal update. Your worship.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. For those of you wondering what an AMO is, it's the Association of Municipalities of Ontario. It's an umbrella group that works closely with the province in various policy matters. They hold an annual general meeting and also a trade fair, and an opportunity to meet with provincial ministers to present to those ministers issues of concern to the various municipalities. It's been referred to as a speed dating process. You have about 10 minutes in front of the minister. You have to be very succinct. The minister, allow the minister time for asking questions if he or she has any. And then there's a photograph taken. So for the minister, I know, and it's odd that these photographs never go anywhere. They're just taken. And then you're at the door. They don't serve notice. They provide notice of the opportunity to apply to provide a delegation to the minister, any minister. You make that application, you put a précis together that describes what your issue is, what you want to discuss. It goes to the appropriate staff at the ministry, and then they filter through these things, and you may or may not be selected. You typically aren't told what's going on till the very last moment, and literally days. And then you're in this case, it was Ottawa, and you find yourself before a minister or a parliamentary assistant, depending on the schedule for the minister. There are 444 municipalities in Ontario, and they're all represented at this annual general meeting. So and it's basically 2.5 days of constant meetings for the ministers, and then a general question and answer session. We were fortunate enough to be allowed to participate in 5 delegations. 2 of them were under the aegis of Simcoe North. So it was Penetangwisheen, Tiny, Tay, and Midland, presenting to, in the first instance, to the Minister of Health, Sylvia Jones. And we were basically looking for the minister's support for 3 items for Georgia Bay General Hospital. The asks were first that we're the only hospital of the size of Midland GBGH that does not have an MRI. So we've asked to be placed on the list for an MRI, and we would expect that Minister Jones will. There are a number to be allocated in this, I think, this fiscal year, and we're hoping to be on that list. The second was we have a second operating theater at GBGH, but it is only partially staffed, and we're looking for operating dollars to fully staff it. Well, what would that mean? That would mean 3,850 approximately visits to other hospitals for surgeries that could be repatriated to GBGH. And so you're not having to travel all over, to Toronto, RVH, wherever for these processes. And the third ask was for an acute psychiatric care facility to be attached to the emergency, new emergency structure at GBGH. This has been something that's been ongoing for 10 years now. It's involved a push and pull between different groups within the health sector about where the money comes from. And of course, everybody's trying to hold on to their money. So we've asked the minister to expedite this and basically inform the minister that in Simcoe County, under the Community Safety Wellbeing Planning process, which Sylvia Jones, the current Minister of Health, initiated as Solicitor General, right across Simcoe County, one of the top 3 issues was mental health and addictions. While we were in Ottawa, there were 3 emergency beds taken up with a mental health issue, and 2 in the just general acute care side of the hospital as well. So the minister undertook to go back with staff and review these things, which is actually fairly positive, because typically they're fairly mute. They don't really commit then and there. So we felt that was fairly, as this was all presented to the minister by the acting president of the hospital. Did a very good job, and the minister said as much. Congratulated him on the presentation, and we hope to see some action from that. I was talking to the chair of the foundation, and he was quite positive about the potential outcome. We'll see. The second delegation, again, was a Simcoe North presentation, and it was prepared again by Tiny Township. And it was basically reporting to the parliamentary secretary for Minister Lumsden, and Mr. Lumsden was otherwise engaged. Basically, what we were presenting to the ministry was that their investment in the Cultural Alliance was yielding significant returns. We had a lot of programming going on involving the 4 municipalities plus mostly First Nation. They were quite surprised at that. It was a grassroots initiative from the municipalities, and that the funding that they provided under what the Trillium Foundation, a seed grant, was in fact yielding significant returns. And they were quite impressed by it and asked if staff from the Cultural Alliance, from the municipalities, would in fact be prepared to teach other municipalities how to manage and run one of these things. So that was very encouraging. It was also in each of these delegations, we strive to accentuate the positive. And so basically, we've had success with Ministry of Tourism for some time now in different funding initiatives for various different programs. And in each case, it's one's building on the next, building on the next. So they begin to see that there's an actual return for continuity of funding. We emphasize that. We make sure they're aware of it. We thank them for it. And we've been very fortunate that in this past year, we probably had the most grants from the province ever. And that's because the senior staff recognized that we needed to have somebody focused on it, knew the language, had the contacts. And because of that, this person has brought these grants in. So that was well received. And from there on, it was basically Midland only deputations. There were 3 of them. Again, one was to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs. And it was basically just to make sure that they understood that Midland is open for business in the tourism side of things, that their continued participation in funding things like the Great Lakes cruising strategy is resulting in significant increases in facilitating cruising on the Great Lakes. The president of Ritz-Carlton was here a couple of weeks ago, and when asked directly why they would be interested in the Great Lakes, they said the river cruising in Europe is literally drying up. If you look at the Rhine and the Danube and so on, there's just a surfeit of water there. Shipping's very much curtailed on these rivers. So they're moving their fleets into the Great Lakes, and we will likely see Ritz-Carlton here in 2024 with a brand new 700-foot, approximately, luxury cruise ship, and with the view to maybe making it as a terminus, which means a lot of income for the province. We made sure the province understood that there was this return coming to Midland and other ports on the Great Lakes as a result of their spending and other spending in terms of building programs. They were very receptive to that, said thank you. We said, and then we said, and we will be back. So we're looking at, they were pretty responsive to that. They said, look forward to your proposal. So that was good. The next and present at this was Mr. Deneau, Mr. Campbell, who was a subject matter expert and helped to put together that cruising business plan for the Great Lakes. Next, we spoke to Minister Clark, and he's the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing. Our concern was that there's a new bill out, Bill 109, that affects planning. And it basically says that after a certain period of time, you go through a process called pre-consultation. Once you finish that, you have a certain amount of time under this new legislation to come to an agreement with the developer. After that, the developer then gets, I think, 25% of their fees back. Then there's another period of time, and if you don't have agreement, then they get 75% of the fees back. And after another period of time, they get 100% of the fees back. The idea is that incents municipalities to speed things up. However, if there's a disagreement coming out of the pre-consultation and going in, then the developer need only drag their feet, and then they get all their fees back, and then they're into another process. So that then incents municipalities to have a very fulsome process. And I know this is sort of very boring, but fundamentally, it creates conflict between, it accentuates potential conflict between the developer and the municipality. So We presented that to him. He didn't agree. He thought that there was, that we could actually increase fees and put more resources in and move things forward. But he was willing to look at, of course, they're going to monitor this to see whether in fact it does create a problem. When we were at county, Deputy Mayor Ross and I would listen to the head of the Builders Association for Ontario, Mr. Schickadance, very well-known, reputable builder. He didn't understand why this legislation was there. He said, me getting my fees back is nothing as compared to me finishing my subdivision and selling those houses. So in his mind, it is not something that will be productive. We relayed that to the minister as well. The minister took it under advisement. So I'm not sure exactly where we ended up, but we made the case, as I'm sure did others. So the ministry is now hearing from municipalities what they think of this particular piece of legislation. And that was the point of this. The last person we spoke to was the Attorney General, Minister Downey, or Attorney General Downey. And we indicated that we had made considerable effort through the OPP and to remove drug peddlers from the streets of Midlands. We've had probably 50 arrests, somewhere between 25 and 30 guns removed from the street, untold numbers of amounts of cash and drugs also removed from the streets. The problem is that the community safety unit in crime unit has been restructured. They're doing such a good job. The province has provided a $3 million grant to the local detachment to train community safety crime unit personnel across the province. They're doing that good a job. Where the fly in the ointment is that they go into the court and 24 hours later, they're back on the street. And initially we thought, well, that's the Attorney General of Ontario. We find out that that's the Attorney General for Canada for that particular group of offenses. And so we will be reaching out through MP chambers and our own offices to speak to the appropriate person at the federal cabinet. In the meantime, the Attorney General said that for the province said that he would in fact lend his support to getting resources applied to the court systems generally. I mean, Penetanguishene Court right now is not open. And you have to ask yourself why. You have to ask yourself why they shut the court system down throughout the pandemic when this municipality was open, albeit by appointment, as were a lot of other municipalities, and were able to run through the auspices of Zoom. So he acknowledged that, and one of his parliamentary assistants was there as well. He acknowledged it. So they're going to try and help to look at ways that they can, and we've heard this before, I'm more interested that we deal with getting these people incarcerated and off the streets, because than some of the promises that are being made at that level. This has been going on for decades, and it really needs significant attention. And if you have to be talking to your MP or your MPP, I would suggest that you let them know that you're not happy with that, because it's really not. It's demoralizing for the police service. People lose faith in the system, and of course our own people are sitting there wondering what the heck is really going on here. So that's a very sort of low level, if you like, high level précis of what happened there. And so I think it was overall productive. We've managed to impress upon various ministers that they are getting a good return on their investment in Midland. You can see it in the various things that are happening here. And I think that overall they've agreed with our assessment. And so I'm hoping we'll continue to see significant funding through grants and so on from those ministries come to Midland, and that the AG will be successful in, the Attorney General will be successful in getting his partner at the federal level to apply a little more funds to the system. So with that, I'll just leave it there.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Thanks for the update. I have Councillor Downer, and I go to Councillor Gordon. I have a question or comment with regard to your item.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say to you, thank you, Your Worship, for representing us so well at AMO. You and your entourage. I hope that we have some success stories out of your meetings. I know they're very detailed, and having been the mayor in the past, having attended some of those meetings, I know they're very stressful under time constraints, and you're only allowed to bring so many people in with you. And Thank you for all your hard work. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Councilor Downer. Councilor Gordon?
Thank you. We affectionately call that catch and release with the bail system. Simply, it's a revolving door. And the irony is, I mean, I think they may have actually misled you a little bit, unless things have changed in the past 4 years radically in the justice system, is that the crowns that prosecute those kind of offenses are indeed federal crowns, but the justice of the peaces who manage the bail system are provincial. So it is very much the provincial system that makes the decision about whether somebody qualifies for a release. And there's 3 grounds that they consider. I won't get into the weeds here, but it seems a little bit like pass the buck. At any rate, the catch and release problem is very much a provincial problem, not the federal crown. That's the prosecuting and getting them in jail at the end. The problem is that, you know, as quick as they get picked up off the street, they're back out again. Sometimes they beat the cop to the Tim Hortons. He's still doing his notes and they're back there having coffee. So the other thing is I wanted to thank you for this update. You'll see later a motion on our agenda that I'm simply going to abandon because I was looking for something like this. Council, you know, doesn't have any input ahead of time on what kind of delegations we want to have or the messages we'd like to have brought forward. And at least in the past 3 years that I've been here, we never found out much about these delegations and what went on and what commitments were made or where perhaps things fell off the tracks. So I do want to thank the mayor for this update. And, you know, there's no reason to beat the dead horse and go for round 2 when my motion comes up. So thank you for the update. Now, the one thing I think is just maybe the elephant in the room that wasn't discussed, and I just wanted to get a little bit of rationale as to why, you know, it didn't make sense to bring this up. And that's that funding inequity that every year we're told about in our OMPF funding, where Midland seems to have, you know, have a dramatic reduction in these transfer funds from the province that has had a, you know, inordinate impact on our taxes as we have to, you know, claw that money out of our good people's pockets as opposed to enjoy some of the fruits that our neighbors receive from the OMPF. So I'm just wondering if the OMPF inequity was just like too big a nut to crack during the AMO, or if you just had other priorities, and what your thoughts are on that as we head into what we didn't pull this report to talk about, but what is staff is projecting a 4.5 to, I'll say 6 to 7% tax increase before we start to whittle things away, or the next council whittle things away. Thank you.
So the question is, so first of all, I'd like to make one statement around what you said in talking with a federal judge, because we were talking about going after the provincial attorney general. He indicated that while the court system was under the provincial attorney general, what I did not mention was that charges that were laid were being downgraded by the Crown to the point where they were almost ticketable offenses. The reason was, and it was stated in a communique, that they didn't have the resources they were in, so they were focusing on serious crime. And the federal judge that I was speaking to said that in Orangeville, they have a backlog of 40 murder cases that they need to clear. So that's their priority. I said, well, that's fine, but this problem's been around for a while, and you really do need to apply resources to clear up the backlog, and whether you need to stream it or whatever. With respect to OMPF, OMPF has been around for a long time, and it's a formula. And there's 5 pillars, I believe, in the OMPF formula. We qualify under one of them. We used to qualify under 2 of them. And at one time, we actually qualified for what was federal funding under Department of Regional and Industrial Expansion. We were classified as a tier 3, and they would pull up an armored car with money basically to get people to move here for industry. That's all changed. We did get industry. Sorry, I'm a little far from the mic. We did get industry here, and our status has changed. So we're now probably in the same boat. We are in basically the same boat as Penetang in terms of share of funding. There's one part of it, and it has to do with assessment. And as our assessment value goes up in the town of Midland, we'll be less and less eligible for that one component. That's as compared to a place like Tiny Township, which I believe gets $1.8 million a year for looking pretty. The province writes them a check, goes into their coffers. I mean, I think staff here would think they died and gone to heaven if they'd gotten $1.8 million. Tay Township's very similar. I think they're somewhere around 1.5 million. When you and we have approached the premier We have approached our MP. We have approached the Minister of Municipal Affairs through correspondence, lamenting the fact that we are not receiving. And that fact, basically the formula is archaic, and we might as well be talking to that wall. It's a very complex thing, and I don't think they're quite interested in dealing with it at this point in time. That doesn't mean we don't try. And we point that out and say, well, there's an inequity here. How can you make that up? There's a thing in if you get a federal facility, and for example, if one were to come to Midland, it's a principle called GILT. It's grants in lieu of taxes. So if a federal facility comes here, they don't pay taxes, but they will provide grants. And so this is what we tried to convey to the various ministers and the premier, that if you're not going to give us the OMPF funding, that at least you could provide us with GILT. Their GILT. So I hope that satisfies your question. There's not a lot of likelihood that it's going to change, and we'll keep trying. If we can't get them to change the OMPF, we'll see if we can GILT them.
I see Councillor Cunningham had a question. Councillor Cunningham.
More of a comment. I just want to thank you, Your Worship, for being part of the Cultural Alliance representation at AMO. I know when Councillor Hastings, who is on the Cultural Alliance, spearheaded this presentation, this deputation, she thought at first she'd be kind of standing there alone, but we're also proud of what the Cultural Alliance is doing in this region. It is such a unifying resource between the cultural asset map. If you have not checked out the YouTube channel of Cultural Alliance, you should be checking that out, because there are some wonderful video stories of our locals in the "do you remember when" question answer style that will just, for those of us who are older, stir up some nostalgia. For those people who are younger, kind of open them up to some curious learnings about what people who are still running around the streets today experienced in the region. We had a staff for a very short time, and we now have a new staff coming in, and some really exciting ideas of how to action that Cultural Alliance material. So keeping the spotlight on the Cultural Alliance at as many levels of government as possible will ensure that we keep that support going. So is vital work that was done in that aspect, in making happy neighbors, making closer neighbors, and also promoting some of the culture and that ability to really weave our cultures together. That is the goal of the Cultural Alliance. So thank you so much for that. And just on a side note, I can put this into announcements, but it's really an announcement to council. If you haven't filled out the Cultural Alliance survey that landed in your email box, please do so. It matters, and it will help steer us forward.
Thank you, Councillor.
Okay,
Could I just make a comment?
please, and then we'll close this up.
So thank you. I was remiss in two things. First is, under the Cultural Alliance, we asked the parliamentary assistant, we advised them that we'll be going back for what's called a GROW grant. It's the follow-on from the grant we received, and it's about $350,000. And so that program's not in effect at the moment, but we sort of put them on notice we'll be coming for that. They were very receptive to that, and they also offered up other funding sources for this particular activity. But what I really wanted to say was that in 2 of the 5 submissions, or delegations rather, Minister Dunlop, our MPP, attended with us and provided support both for the hospital presentation and to the municipal affairs and housing presentation. It made quite a difference. You could see everybody in the room sort of pick up when a minister walked in with us as part of our delegation. So I'd just like to publicly acknowledge the contribution of Minister Dunlop and thank her for that. It did make a difference in how much they paid attention. So thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Your Worship, we'll wrap this up and we'll move on to the next item. Thank you very much for all the conversation. Next on the item is 12.2, a Bayport report update. And I'll have Mr. Deneau give us an update up with regards to this motion.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, to members of council, to the public in the chambers, and obviously the public watching. The report, I'm gonna, obviously the report will be available for public viewing following the meeting. I wanted to summarize some of the content of the report just to make sure that we had an opportunity to discuss this and take any questions from council on it. Staff will be available, obviously, to answer those questions after my summary. The report is in response to some information that came to light on on Thursday of last week before the long weekend. On that day, as any typical Thursday before a long weekend is, quite a busy day, I did receive an email from a buyer at Bayport, and it was not a pleasant email to receive, and certainly disappointing to hear that her contract had been canceled, and she led into me. I mean, she led into the town in this letter, no question, which made me certainly wonder what was in the letter. During that day, I wasn't able to attend a request for a media interview. I picked up the message too late in the day after meetings, but I was able to get a copy of the letter that was sent to those buyers. And I can certainly understand this person's concern. So that's why we wanted to write this report and make sure that we were able to respond to the accusations made about the town. In the letter, which again is publicly available, you'll see a number of references made about the town, which we certainly don't think are factual. The basic statement, though, on the reason why they were canceling the contract, we're not able to satisfy the necessary conditions in the agreement of purchase and sale to complete the transaction at this time. Accordingly, the agreement of purchase and sale will automatically terminate effective August 31st, 2022, and your deposits will return to you. So that certainly seems to speak to some of the contractual language. And this is a contract between Caitlin and their buyers. The town has no influence in that. I'm not aware of the contract terms, but it certainly seems like Caitlin has exercised something that they're able to do within their contract. However, most of the letter does make references to the reasons behind that. The reasons are about the town of Midland. They believe we had everything necessary to process the agreement with the subdivision. Our requests were unreasonable, onerous, led to them having an indeterminable amount of time to fulfill those things. They felt further uncertainty around the new conditions. In addition to it was made it impossible to meet the new lapse date, and has unfortunately forced this into an appeal situation. Again, they make the reference that they've been forced into an uncertainty of an appeal situation, but they do end the letter with a hopeful statement. We're still hopeful that we can obtain the final approval and necessary permits. So they do hold some hope in the ending of that letter, but they did serve termination to, I'm not sure if it's everyone or just a subset, but certainly to that person who contacted me. So we did take obviously great concern with what was the content of that letter, and we felt it was necessary to respond and lay the facts on the table. It was a surprise because I certainly felt that we were making progress on the subdivision. You have a strong team, I'd say, on both sides looking at this thing. It is very complex. It's not just an extension of what you see at the current Caitlin site. There's apartment buildings, some condos, some townhouses, and a hotel in a site that needs some attention, obviously. So we're paying close attention to that. We've got professional mediators working with us when we have a dispute to try and make some progress. I certainly felt like we were making progress on block 27, which some of you may be aware of and I'll speak to, and certainly some around the other issues. So it was, again, some surprise that these allegations were made against the town. However, they were. So a little bit of history that you'll see in the report. So this has taken far too long. I think everyone will agree with that. It's been 3 years, certainly, where the draft plan conditions that were agreed to by Caitlin and the town were in place. So these conditions were agreed to by Caitlin 3 years ago. Many of those conditions still remain unsatisfied. 3 years later, still unsatisfied. Now things have changed. Many things have changed. The economy has changed. The supply of labor and material has changed. The pandemic has certainly introduced legislative changes which impact many, many things. But to lay the consequence of canceling the contracts at the feet of the town, I think is a bit disingenuous. I think there are more facts, obviously, that should have been fulfilled. One example of a currently unfulfilled condition, I think, is really illustrative of the degree of the misrepresentation of the facts. Caitlin does not have a plan for hydropower for that subdivision. There is power for some of the site, but a good part of that site has no hydropower. If you don't have a plan for power, how do you understand how the lots and blocks of the subdivision will be laid out? And that is fundamental to understanding how we can service a subdivision. How do we take care of snow? How does our fire department get into that type of a subdivision? What inconveniences will be caused to the current people that are in that subdivision? So those are very fundamental things that we're working with Caitlin, and certainly the utilities to try and bridge a solution for this. But again, not called out in the letter. A very fundamental condition that is unmet, yet they continue to tell us that we have all the information we need. And that's just not the case. But again, we want to see this obviously done. It's obviously in the town's best interest to have new residents join our community. Full disclosure, obviously it's good to have them on our tax roll. But more than ever, we want them to join that community and bring that spirit that Midland sees. And this is a really important development for us. There are many developments, but this is obviously a very important one. We've made accommodations to Caitlin, despite some of the conditions that have not been met. I think another really important aspect that people need to understand, there's been accommodations made by the town to allow them to continue the work. And if you're familiar with the site, you will have seen work continuing at that site. Earthworks moving around the site, burying various pipes and necessary services to get their work going. And that wasn't something we needed to accommodate, but we felt it was necessary. We thought it was a reasonable accommodation. So there's certainly many aspects to this development that we want to see proceed and to come to fruition, but again, not acknowledged in the letter. What are we asking? So in addition to the power clarity that is, I think, obviously required, there's reasonable assurances that we require to make sure the subdivision can be safely and efficiently serviced by our fire and operations team. I mentioned that. We need reasonable details on identifying how the current residents in the area will not be inconvenienced by the construction work. So the development is taking place around in an existing subdivision with people living there. And we wanted some assurances to make sure that they're not disrupted, because we have seen instances of that in the past, not necessarily with this builder, but we want to make sure that those types of residences are protected. And we wanted those assurances as part of the condition. There are basic zoning conditions that we want clarity on. The site is zoned for a particular use, and some of the uses that they're suggesting, we certainly feel need some working on the definition under the zoning. We've not yet received their material on allowing 4 homes that are already built, this is the block 27 homes, to assume ownership. And we certainly feel that is low-hanging fruit that we can really demonstrate to the community and certainly to everyone else that this project will continue to move forward, and we want this to happen. We think this can happen fairly easily, but they must be separated from that subdivision agreement. What have we received? We've received many letters from Caitlin and their lawyers. We've received many calls from agitated residents and buyers, and we've done our best to call them back and try and make sure they understand the facts. We've received much lobbying from council and opinions of contracted planners hired by Caitlin. But all of this time and effort, we certainly feel should have been spent in clearing the conditions. Quite clearly, a lot of time spent on other things. We think that time should have been spent on clearing the conditions and working with us again through the mediation process where we have a disagreement to work on a path to clear that condition. On August 19th, Caitlin appealed the updated draft plan conditions, including the extended lapsing date. So we did provide an extension to their 3 years. It was a short extension, but we wanted again to demonstrate that we could make progress. We do have the ability to extend again. So they appealed that extension. Their appeal letter acknowledged that there are electrical and phasing issues that will take longer than 3 months to resolve. They acknowledged that in their appeal again, but it wasn't in the letter. On August 25th, Caitlin's engineers, they finally organized the meeting with the utilities. We were in attendance again. So I think we've got some improved clarity around how we can we can deal with the hydro issue because there are two utilities involved. It's not easy. We certainly admit that it will be complex, but we need to understand how the power will be delivered. It's fairly fundamental to a site agreement. So again, we're working with them to try and make this happen. But again, there are obvious delays that will be introduced by that. So we're a little disappointed not to see that acknowledged in the letter. What can be done in terms of moving forward? When we were first advised, we were advised earlier in this year by Caitlin that they were going to consider a phasing of the subdivision, which we thought was a practical way to deal with getting some people into their homes, like Block 27 and maybe others, if you fulfill some of those conditions and wait on getting agreements on some of the other parts of the site. In March of 2022, so this year, March, Caitlin indicated that they intended to register the entire subdivision at one time. So they wanted to register everything at one time, again, which makes it a little more complex, a lot more conditions that they have to deal with in a time frame, you know, that they're trying to hit the market with. So it puts certainly a lot of pressure. We're certainly would like them to consider the phasing approach. We think it's something that would potentially make sense to allow them to deliver the project a little quicker, at least parts of it. With respect to subdivisions, there are portions that don't rely. So there are some portions that don't rely on high voltage lines, as I pointed out in the hydro agreement. And again, because they don't rely upon this new hydro solution, that is one potential area that could be potentially served by a phased-in solution. Again, those are aspects that we've talked to Caitlin about. The last thing I'll speak to before concluding is that I know there's lots of people that have suggested that this matter would be easily resolved if we all get into a room and we take down action items with actionable dates and make some commitments. With all due respect, we've gone beyond that. We've hired professional mediators. There's professionals in planning, legal matters, and in mediation on both sides. And I think that has actually served this project fairly well. But we have to respect that process. And we certainly would like them to, when they have a dispute with the town, let's work it through the mediation process. These are very seasoned people in doing this on the planning front, and we think it will be very fruitful. So in conclusion, Caitlin has been promising but unable to resolve some fundamental issues, such as power, since at least August of last year. We've been working with them, as I said, to try and resolve some of these conditions, but to indicate and publicly continue to indicate that the town has everything it needs is just not accurate. In response to, they did make a comment about this being an unprecedented situation. I'm not really sure what they referred to that, but the cancellation of building contracts is far from unprecedented. And unfortunately, we're seeing more of that, and regrettably, it's across the province. In response, the provincial government has authorized the Home Construction Regulatory Authority. So there's a specific regulatory authority put in place to deal with these kinds of disputes between builders and homeowners. So this is, I would not say, a very unprecedented thing to happen. A very unfortunate thing, absolutely, but unprecedented, I would say not. You don't put an authority in place if this is happening infrequently. But that's, I'm certainly not suggesting that Caitlin has done anything untowards. I'm sure the contract, they're exercising what they certainly believe is available to them in their contract, and that they haven't violated those contractual obligations. But the agency is there to assist in any disputes if there is some assistance they can offer. So what do we suggest is certainly the quickest and most successful way to advance the situation. We certainly feel that, again, respecting the mediation process, we've got professionals involved in doing that. Let's do that. We think they should withdraw their appeals. They've appealed a number of things, but I think that will just tie up more time with lawyers and planning staff that are fully consumed with a very demanding interest in Midland. So we certainly would appeal to them to drop their appeals, withdraw them. Advance the necessary application supporting material. So let's spend our time on advancing the material that we've asked for. If you have a dispute with something, let's talk about what those disputes are and see if we can resolve that. We've done it in some situations. I think we've made progress on some things. Let's do it on those other things. Please prepare your response to the town comments on the 2 developments that you have. So we provided some comments. We want to hear back from them on that. Provide the requested material for block 27. That's certainly very high on our priority list. We really want to get those 4 owners into those homes. We think it is something that can be done fairly easily if they provide the information, and we can remove the hold on those blocks. The final thing I would say is we'd like them to obviously consider the phased approach as opposed to the entire subdivision being registered at one time. We think it might afford them the ability to register some of those aspects of the subdivision and make some progress on what's being done there. But certainly, we want to acknowledge and understand the disappointment of the buyers. That's first and foremost, I think, in everyone's mind, and I would say in Caitlin's as well. I'm sure they would love to be turning over keys to people, as would we. We obviously want, as I said, the town has no interest in delaying anything like this. This would be certainly anti-productive from a town's point of view to invest this much time and energy and not see the fruits of that energy result in new people coming into our community, being supportive of the community and having the Midland spirit, that we want them to certainly enjoy. But the legislation and bylaws do require us to make sure that it's done safely and in accordance with what those bylaws state. It is not up to the developer to determine what information we require. And that's certainly where we are at this point. But I do want to end this on an optimistic note, as I think the letter did. I do feel hopeful that this subdivision will get built. I'm hopeful that the original buyers will be able to get into those homes that they contracted with, but that is a matter for Caitlin to deal with. But I can assure you that our planning, our engineering team, our building team is fully committed to supporting this project and all the other projects that are keeping us busy, because Midland is a very desirable area. So with that, I'll conclude my remarks, and certainly if there's any questions from council.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deneau. I appreciate the update. Not the best news, but never easy to hear, but thank you so much for the update. I do have a motion coming out of this, that staff report, CSR-2022-58 status report, Bayport Village Phase 2 termination of purchase dated September 7th, 2022 be received for information. I need a mover and a seconder for this item. Councillor Gordon and Mayor Strathern. And I'll turn it over to Councillor Gordon for a first comment. I did see Councillor Cunningham. Anybody else have a question or comment? Mayor Strathern. Okay, Councillor Gordon. Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I'd like to defer to Councillor Cunningham first, please. I saw her card up before I put my hand up, so.
Thank you, Councillor Gordon. If I may go ahead, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I just really want to thank you, Mr. CAO. I think it is really vital that these facts are shared and that you share them in such a calm and neutral way. Just the facts is also very appreciated. As you can imagine, we are all probably getting conversations wondering what's going on, whether the people in the neighborhood or just people in the town of Midland wondering what's happening with their neighbors down the way. I think the availability of the facts in the light of what is misinformation that is going around out there, and the risk of that being used and inflated, that is can create discord that's just not necessary in our community. So having you lay out these facts for us in such a rational, specific, timeline-based way with some specificity that people can get their teeth into. The generalities, while we can trust our staff and know that you're working hard, hearing some of the specifics help us really grasp how much work has been going into this, how much creativity, how much thought process that the staff has been bringing to bear. And that helps me in these conversations. And I know you've been responding to emails and so on for me with some of the specific asks. And again, tons of staff time, tons of your time going into this, and a great use of time. So thank you so much for bringing this forward and laying it out in such a neutral way that I find very helpful. And I know there are a few people watching this evening and watching for this report to come out tomorrow, so that they have that surety of what's really happening and that documentation that they can get access to.
Thank you, Councillor Cunningham. Councillor Gordon?
Thank you very much, Mr. CEO, for the update. I've been following this very closely. I think as anyone who's campaigning for re-election has been. And I guess the one problem that still remains, unanswered for me, and I think a lot of people out there, is a lot of ambiguity around, is that these 4 units in Block 27, and I'm going to focus my questions on that because clearly phase 2 in its totality is nothing that's going to advance this term. It's going to fall well into the hands of the new council. But Block 27, I got to feel that we got to be close. But I'd like to know precisely what conditions remain unmet from Caitlin for Block 27 to move along to where we can lift the hold and these folks can register their lots and get into their houses that appear to be fully serviced with electricity, everything. What exactly is delinquent here?
Mr. Farr, you care to answer?
Through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, to Councillor Gordon. The town has identified the requirements necessary for Caitlin to advance the final approval for Block 27 on numerous occasions on the record. First through report CSR 2022-37, then following that through a detailed record of pre-consultation notes that we've actually not received a response directly through staff to that list of requirements. And those include annotated set of conditions. So what we've done is we flagged the specific conditions among the current applicable conditions for the phase 2 development that would be limited to only Block 27. So this is dealing with matters when people say, well, the power's on, the water's on, those things are cleared and certified through previous agreements that Caitlin has entered into with the town. So we've asked them to specify within those agreements the clearances associated with those items. There's a number of additional items, all of which are in Caitlin's possession and have also been conveyed to them through the town solicitor. I just add that in citing the requirements for Caitlin, the question's gone to the town solicitor as to whether these are reasonable requirements and are easily fulfilled, and the answer is absolutely yes. That information lies with Caitlin in their domain, and we're awaiting the requested materials. And I don't think there's any question that that the town has made absolutely clear what's necessary. And again, as I said, it's been scoped very simply, and we are basically preparing to act in anticipation of receiving that material.
Well, Councillor Gordon.
Thank you for the response, I suppose. But I mean, really what I'm looking for is a bulleted list of 2, 12, 50 items. And I'm assuming that it's not that many. I'd really like to know what they are. You told me it's been referred to in the past, and there was, quite a long circular, in my opinion, non-response to a very direct question. I just want to know, and I want it on the record for everybody following this right now, exactly what the list of deficiencies are, because when I go and have my meeting with Caitlin, which I plan to do, not to undermine our town processes, but I want to make sure that their understanding of those 2, 12, or 20 deficiencies are exactly the same as what the towns are. because I mean, I'm sitting here with my fingers on my keyboard, ready to write a list of what these things are. I don't need the nauseating detail of, you know, baffle gab and planning speak that it probably would be over my head, but, you know, I'd just like to know, and I think other people here, including some people that own one of the Block 27 houses, what exactly is outstanding from Caitlin?
Mr. Farr, care to answer?
Okay, so through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, as the CAO previously identified, the town's using its solicitor to communicate to Caitlin the requirements. At this point in the public forum here, I'm kind of loath to be kind of fact checked as to the kind of veracity of the information that we're communicating through our lawyer. The materials are publicly available. Our lawyer is in direct contact with Caitlin. We continue to await these materials, and I think I'd leave that as my answer for now.
Thank you. Mayor Strathern?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. This has been going on far too long. This process started as a result of an application by Caitlin to modify an approved site plan for what is phase 2 from a condominium townhomes to freehold. In doing so, the road structure had to be changed because we're now talking about municipal level roads that require 66-foot right-of-ways. We're not contemplating the original plan. To make it financially viable, I assume, Caitlin then asked for provisions to change the depth of the lots and the width of the lots to accommodate a little more density, presumably to make up their numbers when they lost space as a result of the 66-foot road right away. You say, so what? Well, in accommodating that, the municipality set 43 conditions. To date, 3 of them have been met, is my understanding. Only 3 in 3 years. Caitlin makes the case that, well, we've provided all the information you need, so why aren't you approving it? So then they proceed to go to the land tribunal, and the communication starts through the legal process. Once that happens, despite what Councillor Gordon says he's going to do, for him to go directly and talk to Caitlin puts the municipality in jeopardy. With respect to his conversation, this is what Mr. Farr is trying to say. We are dealing through lawyers, and we've been doing that for some time, and we're getting and mediation, and we're getting to a point where people are starting to actually move. I vehemently disagree with the Councillor Gordon having anything to do with Caitlin at this point in time, but he persists in saying that he will do so. But having said all of that, the fact of the matter remains that we've been given partial submissions to requests by staff. And what does that mean? Well, they start to review the submissions, believing that they're complete. They get partway through it. And by the end of the week, they have a completely revised submission. Throw the old one out, start over again. Do that for a year and a half and see how you feel about, I know how I feel about it. It's inappropriate use of our municipal resources. And frankly, it's not helping the people who are trying to move in. Throughout the piece, Caitlin has been making public statements, basically derogatory to our executive director. They're totally unfounded, and I personally take exception to it. I stand solidly behind the executive director. They indicate that we brought in 2 consultants and they agreed that Caitlin was meeting the standards and conditions. I find that interesting that they would say that in the absence of a utilities plan, particularly electricity. How can you, as the CAO laid out, how can you possibly lay out a site plan when you don't know how you're going to be providing the electricity to it? And utilities impact a lot of other downstream events. How could a reputable planning firm say that they've met conditions when we are waiting for an external agency to approve how you're going to provide electricity? I mean, what are we supposed to do? Just turn around and say, okay, do this. And then when you turn your light switch on, the lights don't go on, your furnace doesn't work, your fridge doesn't work. And So they're in conversation, and in the meeting that the CAO referred to, it would appear that it's between 6 months and a year to get this through Hydro One. That was 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks ago, that was made clear. So then how can you say to somebody in a letter where you're terminating when you're terminating their hopes and dreams of that they put in good faith, put a down payment on? Oh, well, you know, if we can build this within the year, we'll honor our purchase price of the contract. It's not possible. It's physically not possible. So it's disingenuous at a minimum to say that to people. The communication from these folks has been less than stellar. Our people have worked very hard to accommodate. You've heard some of the ways in which we have done so. There is a process that was put in place that would expedite Block 27. And what's frustrating is you can reach out and touch the building, but legally that building does not exist. You cannot register. It's not registered in the land registry, and we cannot issue occupancy permits. And all it would take is for Caitlin to sit down at the table seriously and work with staff. And that, as I understand it, is not happening. If you really, and when you talk about the other 123 people who put their hard-earned money and their dreams and so on into moving into a home in a beautiful place called Midland, surrounded by other beautiful homes in the neighborhood, and you look at that, you say to yourself, how could they possibly be so disingenuous in the way that they're communicating with those people? When an alternative by the town, and Caitlin basically said they wish to do this back in March, by phasing would get a large number of those people into their homes. It would truncate a lot of the process, as I understand it. So I find it very, very disingenuous, the position that Caitlin's taken. I have a huge hole in my emotions in terms of what's happening to people who are trying to get into their homes, and that they're being, I think, not fed the right information by the people that they're in contract with. We are doing what we can. We are doing what we can to expedite this. And I think that any interference by members of council by going directly to Caitlin is intolerable. It jeopardizes the town's position in a whole variety of places. And I strongly recommend that Councillor Gordon cease and desist. We've done this before in another project over in another part of town. It put us in a bad legal position with respect to enforcing conditions on another site plan.
I think Councillor Gordon gets the point, so we'll move on if we could. No, we're going to round this up. Mr. Deneau, you had something to add?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just on the Block 27 issue, and I know I suspect Councillor Gordon feels we're being evasive on the issue, and that's certainly not the case. And I do want to reiterate that I think we're making progress on Block 27. Now, we've had part of the mediation team that I referred to. They are actually taking a bit of time on vacation, so we contacted our lawyer while he was on vacation to get a bit of an update, and he provided some hopeful news. But again, we need to corroborate that with the Caitlin side. I think there are very few conditions left to clear. I think they're committing to take care of most of them, and there are very few that are left to be handled. That's why, as Mr. Farr indicated, we're preparing to move on seeking council's authority to remove the H, so we can get ready to do that. So we're optimistic that this is going to move forward. We're hoping there's no more surprises or no more letters that I'm going to receive, coming in. And I just want to leave it at that. And I do, in my summary, I did indicate, if we want this thing to move efficiently and fast and get to somewhere, the first point I made is I think we need to all respect the mediation process, because I don't think that's been done to its full extent through this process. And I don't think it's helpful when people who aren't part of that process get involved. I think it gets complicated. That will potentially result in legal consequences, as been indicated, and it could hurt versus help. I know the intent is honest, and they're trying to be helpful, but certainly from the experience of this project, it hasn't helped to this point.
Thank you very much. I'm going to close this up. If we had a motion on the floor, moved by Councilor Gordon, second by Mayor Strathern, that staff report CSR 2022-58, staff report Bayport Village Phase 2 termination of purchase dated September 7th, 2022 be received for information. All those in favor? So carried. Next up, we have notices of motion. Any notice of motion come forward from this council today? I see none. I do have one. I'd like to put on the floor. We'll discuss it next meeting. It is that the sidewalk on Howard Street between Woodland Drive and Penetang Road be named in honor of former Mayor George McDonald, and a dedication ceremony take place in the spring of 2023. We'll have discussion at the next meeting, but and I'll provide proper paperwork to the clerk. Thank you. Any announcements this evening? Mayor Strathern?
I'd just like to acknowledge the 75th anniversary of the Canadian Rangers. And for those of you who don't know what that is, if you saw Mr. Stoltenberg, the head of NATO, accompanying the Prime Minister and a bunch of people around him carrying, wearing red jackets, and they're Indigenous folks. They comprise the Canadian Rangers. They were tasked during the Second World War with being basically coastal watchers on the Pacific side, as we were focused on the conflict in Europe. It's since expanded into the Arctic. They're responsible for looking at any abnormal situations in the Arctic as well, and reporting back, as well as providing search and rescue and so on. It's their 75th anniversary, and 35 of these folks were started at Kilmere Park on Monday and stopped at the Big Chute. I was fortunate enough to sit down with some of them, talk to, trying to remember her name, Jocelyn. She had traveled by boat 5 days to get to a point where she could actually then travel by land to get to Kilmere. And that's indicative of the sort of conditions that folks, the Indigenous folks, are involved with regularly. My point is that these folks came a long way to celebrate the 75th anniversary. It's a 750-kilometer canoe trip from Kilmere to Ottawa, down the Trent-Severn Waterway, and then up to Rideau. And I think it's important that we recognize the service that these folks provide to the country. It's very seldom we hear of them. And so congratulations to them on their 75th anniversary, and best bon voyage on your journey to Ottawa, where I hope you will see the appropriate recognition. So thank you.
Thank you, Worship. I have Councillor McGinn, then Councillor Gordon. Councillor McGinn, and I see Councillor Cunningham also, so that'll be the order.
So my announcement is also includes a thank you. So it's a thank you to a police officer who has a celebration tomorrow, who is retiring. Deb Brown has earned her retirement, well earned her retirement. Thank you very much for your service. Thank you for being so very community driven. Thank you for being very down to earth and real and approachable. So there is a celebration tomorrow at the boathouse, starting at 8 o'clock. So I'd like to hear some stories about her and let her know how well she's loved. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor McGinn. Councillor Gordon?
Oh, I could tell you some stories about Deb, but I'll save it for the boathouse and a few beers. This is more of an announcement, I think, that really falls under the town's bailiwick. And by me talking about this and announcing it, I don't want anybody at the town to feel like I'm giving them a kick in the shins or anything. This is about the upcoming municipal election. And the fact that I'm discovering almost daily that few people in the community realize that we eliminated wards. I know it's in the website and been on the paper and stuff. They don't realize we've eliminated wards, and they can actually build an entire council come voting time. And even more incredulously, they don't realize that we've gone away from paper ballots and to online only, or telephone. But I mean, I can't even imagine that process. But the key here is that maybe it's more of a question for staff in the announcement time, which we're not supposed to do, but I don't know what else I'm going to do it because we're almost out of meetings. What are the plans to advertise the heck out of these changes so that we don't have even lower than 30 to 35% turnout? Are we hanging banners on King Street and Yonge and are we taking out full page ads and are we going on the radio station? And also about having people check to make sure they're on the voters list. You can't go to voter lookup anymore. It's closed, right? The list is now in the clerk's hands and candidates can come pick it up now. But I'm running across people that are renters or just new to town that didn't get election cards for the provincial election, which presumably means they won't get anything for the municipal election either, without contacting now the town. There's a contact number, if you go to the voter lookup, where it says to contact Catherine Lemisurier at the town and a phone number to make sure that you're not already on the list, maybe you think you are or you're not. And secondly, to get added. So that process, all these really important things to our fundamental democratic process that's, whatever it is, 50 days away or something. I'm just wondering what the town plans are on that. And if there's anything we as councillors can do other than, using our social media and web streams and whatever to help promote these huge changes to our electoral system. Thank you.
Madam Clerk, you got an answer, or Mr. Deneau? We can get Mr. Deneau if you like. No? Okay, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, through you, Deputy Mayor, to Councillor Gordon. Clerk's staff have been working diligently on updating information on the website. We just did a revamp once nomination period had closed. So we have all the information about the Voter Assistance Center. We've promoted it on our social media sites. And probably in the next few days, we've created a flyer that's going to be sent out to all residents. And it's going to have all the information that they need about that we're voting at large, that it's internet telephone. We're doing the best we can as far as trying to get the word out. And we've been proactive in getting the message across to residents. So hopefully the word is going to spread, but every resident will receive a flyer within the next few days. It's going to be mailed out with all the appropriate information.
Great news. Thank you. That's wonderful. Thank you. Councillor Cunningham.
Yes, it's also the other most wonderful time of the year, not just election.
Councillor Cunningham, I apologize. I think Madam Clerk had more to add. I apologize for cutting you off.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I also wanted to point out that we've done many notices in the paper. We've always included an elections section in our town pages each month. And yeah, so we are trying to get the word out as best we can. So hopefully once the flyers go out to residents, then it'll be better known.
Thank you very much, Ms. Egger, for the update. Appreciate that. I apologize, Councillor Cunningham, but it's all yours.
No worries. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So it is the other most wonderful time of the year. In addition to election time, it is back to school time. And I just want to speak more to people. If you know a youth, especially somebody who is in grade 9, 10, 11, 12, the space between when they used to be active in the community and now can be a vastly disheartening, disillusioning time when things were shut down, when you couldn't go to cadets in person and you couldn't attend sporting events and participate in extracurriculars. It needs a little bit of extra oomph, a little bit of extra encouragement. Let people know cadets is starting back up again. Let them know what activities you're aware of that are starting up. And even be available for some of the shuttling around, trying to help people through the other side of the shutdown includes helping people with the mental health, getting them out socializing, getting them back into the activities that they haven't had access to for so long. And there can be a real hurdle to get out again after being away from it for so long. It can be nerve-wracking. If children and youth are dealing with anxiety or depression or fears, just be aware of that. So if there are family members that you know of or people in your neighborhood, encourage them now when everything's starting up again, because a month from now, they're going to feel like they're behind, and it's going to be even more anxiety producing to think about joining in then. So just a little public service announcement to see what you can do to encourage youth to join up, sign up, get out, explore a couple of opportunities again out in the community so that they can feel connected, feel that they belong again, because that's what they lost during the pandemic.
Well said, Councillor Cunningham. Thank you so much. Councillor Main.
Thank you very much. on Monday, we're going to be celebrating Terry Fox Day in Midland, and we're going to have a flag raising. So if you can attend on Monday, that'd be delightful. And also the run is coming up. If you haven't seen the signs around town, September 18th. And it's going to be a great cause. And Don Chapman and the team have done such a great job. And Fred Fox was even in town the other week. Super inspirational, just an incredible story. What an incredible legacy to be a part of. And so we appreciate all the efforts of the volunteering committee. Speaking of amazing volunteers, the business improvement area had a significant changeover at the board level at the last annual general meeting about a month ago. And so some longstanding board members passed the torch on to some new members. So I just wanted to take a moment just to thank Karen Shepherd, Pauline Meredith, Christine Taylor, and Scott Campbell, aka Mr. Downtown, for all their years of dedication to the downtown. Karen was so monumental in the facade improvement. Paula is the one you can thank for the beautiful gardens, the hanging baskets downtown. She has a real eye for style. And Christine, an amazing, always brings amazing energy. And Scott, of course, is involved in anything and everything downtown related, parking to downtown master plan to King Street reconstruction. And so if you do have any concerns, you can follow up with the new chair, Joni Petroff, if you're downtown getting some candles at her lovely store. And just wanted to update the community on that. And finally, I had somebody told me some really amazing news. They said, oh, I saved a life the other day. I said, oh, well, you're gonna have to explain that story. So I don't want to name him, but he was a good Samaritan who works downtown, and he performed the Heimlich maneuver on somebody on King Street as they were choking on a delicious Georgian Bakery donut. And they literally, their face was turning purple, and he was a few steps behind them, and he stepped in. Ambulance was called, and they were okay. And they said, thank you so much. And so I just want to say thank you to that lovely good Samaritan. And Midland, we are here for each other. And I think that was a great story. So thank you to the anonymous good Samaritan. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Mayor Strathern, and any other announcements? Well,
It's really not an announcement. It's just a follow on from Councillor Main's observations about Terry Fox. Judging by the number of signs in the community, he's clearly winning the election.
That is true. Any other announcements? None this evening. That closes my section. So moved by Councillor Downer, second by Councillor Cunningham, that the committee of the whole rise and report. All those in favor? So carried. Your worship, it's all yours.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I have a motion here moved by Councillor McGinn, seconded by Councillor Main, that the recommendations of the committee of the whole for the meeting of September 7th, 2022 be adopted as resolutions of council. Council, you've heard the motion. Comments or questions with respect to it? Seeing none, then all in favor. Thank you. That carries. We now move to motions for which notice was given. We have 17.1 moved by Councillor Gordon, and the motion reads that council approve a community safety zone for Cook Drive along with the installation of a safety silhouette device. Do we have a seconder for this motion? Councillor McGinn, thank you. Councillor Gordon.
Thanks. I'd just like to first off shout out to Councillor Prost, who was with us for the first part of the meeting, but she got tickets to go see Elton John in Toronto. It's like a lifetime experience for her. So she stayed on as long as she could. You might have seen her in the bushes and stuff earlier, but I think she's probably right now just like, watching the show. So she's here in spirit, and she would have been my de facto seconder on this. Long story short is there's been ongoing issues about the perception of speeding on Cook Drive. They didn't seem to be backed up by the science of our one time we measured it back in the day. And of course, so it didn't qualify for our new traffic calming. There is currently a move underfoot, thanks to staff, that there's another kick at the can. There's a speed sign telling you how fast you're going, and it's gathering metrics on Cook Drive. I should just point while I'm talking about this that the staff think it would be, that residents think it would be more helpful if it wasn't at the curve where people naturally slow down anyway, hopefully. If it was more in the center, but anyway, I'll leave that to you guys. But it's doing its job gathering metrics and data. But one of the precursors to just about anything we could do in even areas that don't qualify under the new traffic calming bylaw that could easily be reviewed, next year after it's been around for a year, is council can approve a community safety zone in that area, which would effectively double the speeding fines for any police enforcement that happens to find itself on that street for now. It also opens the door to a program that really caught my eye at the AMO, the conference for automated speed enforcement cameras, which can be installed in a municipality for virtually no capital and on a cost recovery basis through administrative penalty programs rather than the overclogged court system. This is a conversation that if I'm back, next term, we're going to have a good fulsome conversation with the community about. But the caveat is it needs to be a community safety zone or a school zone, or that it doesn't qualify under the MTO's blessing. So to me, this is the low hanging fruit. I have no fantasy that because, assuming this passes tonight, that all of a sudden the police are going to be there with the radar gun writing tickets. But if they do happen across that street and choose to, run radar on it, the fines are doubled. And perhaps that sign that gets erected in the community where we declare a community safety zone may act as a deterrent for a few of the people speeding through there. The addition to this motion of the safety silhouette device is a little add-on, again, that I saw down at AMO, which the mayor spoke to earlier, our Association of Municipalities of Ontario trade show. And it's very similar to the yellow plastic, spring-loaded devices that we did have down on Bayshore a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, and we probably still have them somewhere. It's very similar, except it's not just a yellow plastic pylon that people can hit and, pops up again after. But it's a cutout, it looks like a kid, and it has a rather photorealistic picture of a child, with a ball. Sometimes there's different ones you can get. They're about $500. I just roughly priced them out when I was there. And it gets bolted into the ground on the center line in the middle of the street and acts as an emotional device to slow people down, because presumably they're not winding up to drive over it because it takes out your oil pan. So, and it comes out in the wintertime for snow clearance, clearly. So I thought, I'm going to bolt the two together in this motion, hoping, the addition of the safety silhouette device doesn't undermine and kill the rest of the motion. And I'm prepared to have it removed if anyone here thinks it's just bananas. Let's not do it. But I'd really like to see us approve this community safety zone. It's a small but meaningful step that the community residents on Cook Drive, who we met with, would appreciate until we finish collecting all the stats and see if there's something more we can do, like speed bumps or, and other passive traffic calming techniques. So just long story short, I think that's really the pitch for why I'd like to have this passed, and I'm looking for your support this evening.
Thank you, Councillor. Questions with respect, sorry, before I go there, Mr. Campbell, do you have any comments with respect to the area?
Thank you, Your Worship, and through to some of the comments from Councillor. We have had that speed radar out there for the last 6 days, and over that time, the average speed was 31.95 kilometers per hour. That's up a little bit from the last time we measured, which was 28.5 kilometers an hour. So that's one of the challenges. That street wouldn't, at those speed limits, match our protocol under the policy. And when we look at what were the fastest vehicles, there's about, in 2019, 1.7% of the vehicles were over 50 kilometers an hour. And this past recording, the 85th percentile was only 41.3 kilometers an hour. So there isn't a speed problem there, but there is the odd person that is speeding. In the last 6 days, the fastest speed measured was 76 kilometers an hour for one vehicle. So there is a problem. I think as council is considering this motion, you need to also consider Cook Drive there's a parallel street to it, Wright Drive. They both have the same entrance and exit to that subdivision. If council is going to go down this road, you might as well consider Wright Drive at the same time. But I think the larger concern from a traffic management is these safety zones, council can put them wherever they wish under the regulations. To date, we've used them in school zones and park zones. And once we start moving into putting these on other streets, I think we have to recognize every street then would become eligible. Because again, it's not a measurable traffic issue, it's a concern by residents. So I think if council does consider this one, then you would need to, look at changing the policy that every street in town has this, which you've taken something that has meaning and made it meaningless, when really if it's police enforcement, that's a separate issue from this. So from the staff perspective, staff are at the will of council, but if we were to write a report, this would not, fit our policy for implementing things. We have many more streets that have much higher traffic levels and higher traffic speeds, and honestly, Cook Drive, with what we've measured and the facts, it wouldn't warrant traffic calming. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. I understand too, there's another technique available, street light. You wish to speak to that?
Your worship, yes. The numbers I mentioned were what we've measured with the radar that is on it. We also have the streetlight program where we have data that is delayed in nature when we get it. That's using cell phone data. And certainly if council wishes a report on this or other streets, we can get some significant other data over a longer period of time through the streetlight data. We only have council approved a limited budget for that software. So we only have so many streets a year we can do measuring on right now. But if it's something that this council or the next council wishes us to be able to open up for more analysis, it's just, as I always say, budget and give me the money and I can get more data.
It's basically a geofencing product that'll gives you time of day, speed, location.
Yes, that basically uses anyone who is on the street or in a vehicle that's moving. It's if your cell phone is pinging a tower, that data is available with all the GPS information that's on your phone that we get through that software.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. So I'll open it up for conversation. I see Deputy Mayor Ross, Councillor Shevsky, Councillor Main, Councillor Gordon, and Councillor Cunningham.
Thank you very much, Your Worship, and I appreciate the motion, and I want to thank Mr. Campbell for the update. Sorry, this is Mike. The first thing that came to mind right away was if we do it for Cook, and I'm not saying no, I'm just throwing it out there that we're now going to ask to do it for everybody. I always thought the community safety zone was sort of something that we did in our school areas by busy parks, etc. I'm hearing was it 1.7% or not going or exceeding the speed limit? Is that correct? Was I right on that number?
1.7% exceeding 50 kilometers.
50 kilometers, which is the speed limit. I would say that there's probably 40-50% of them fly by Monday's Bay, going much faster than 50. And we have that as a school zone or as a community safety zone. But I guess I'll sum this up. The thing I'm concerned, I'm not going to be here next term, but I can envision hundreds of people coming. I have complaints of my family members live on 5th Street, Bay Street, 7th Street. There's not a street in town that there's not a car going by. And I said it earlier to somebody, at one time when we were kids, if I sped down the street, someone would come and talk to my parents and they'd say, hey, Mike's driving too fast up and down the street, and it would stop immediately. For some reason, our communities, because I could promise, I would almost guarantee that the person going 75 kilometers on that street is some neighbor's son who's just got his new Honda Civic and he wants to go fast. And I don't know why at one time we had a community that you'd reach out to the family members and you'd just tell them and it would stop immediately. Unfortunately, the world has changed and that doesn't happen. But I am concerned with regards to, we open it up for this street, then you guys, the new people that are sitting here next term, are going to be overwhelmed with it. I can promise you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Shevsky.
Thank you, Your Worship. I do acknowledge and understand there's an issue on Cook Drive. I've had multiple complaints from different residents and I've met with different people. I think the fact that it's a bridge between Yonge and Hugill and more people are discovering it, I think that is a contributing factor. The fact that that has been taken for 6 days and school has only been back for 2, I think is maybe a contributing factor too, not to generalize young people. But I was doing collective bargaining on Maxwell Drive, adjacent to St. Teresa's High School today, and we could barely talk because the revving of motors in the parking lot. And I hate to be up here generalizing young people, but here I am. And so I think, the kids going back to school in high school may be a contributing factor. I think the data may change over coming days and weeks. Also, the fact that there's ongoing construction in there and cars parked on the side of the road, I think that might be slowing traffic down a bit. Maybe once the construction is stopped in there, we may see increased speeds. Is there a process for a temporary community safety zone? And if not, what's the process from removing a street as a community safety zone? Because maybe we identify this as an issue now, but the issue may go away in the future. Is there a process for removing community safety zone designation if a problem is resolved?
Mr. Campbell.
Through your worship to Councilor Chesky, council needs to pass a bylaw to amend our warranted signage in town. Council also has the authority to withdraw that sign on the schedule. So council has that option. I would wonder what the decision-making policy is to withdraw it. I'm not sure what that would be, especially when there was no policy warrant to put it in place in the first place.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. Councilor Main.
Thank you, Your Worship. Cook Drive is quite interesting because it's actually probably one of the densest streets in town. It's a very new, modern townhouse, row house situation. So it's kind of an interesting thing because we never really factor that into our traffic calming policy. And the traffic calming policy, the initial, as Deputy Mayor Moss would say, the point was to try to spread out traffic calming solutions across the town to try to cool the hot zones. So I'd be supportive of traffic calming in this area. I guess the tricky thing is we have a process we're trying to follow through and the data doesn't necessarily show with the current speed limit, but that raises the point of 50 kilometers is probably inappropriate street for many of our residential streets. We've looked at Lakewood. We dropped that one by 10 kilometers an hour by request of the community. I thought that was a really good solution. That again is a very simple, quick fix for Cook Drive, move down to 40. People are going to be very familiar with other places that have 30s. Calgary and out west have 30s in some residential areas. Again, that's, if you do it here, you do it elsewhere. And I'd be supportive of doing it elsewhere because especially through the pandemic, speed has been a huge issue. People are not doing well, as we know. A great example of some traffic calming was Bass Lake. I don't know if anyone's driven through Bass Lake recently, but they have a great little chicane, as we've talked about, vertical and horizontal deflection, and a very simple little thing that they have in Bass Lake. Just a few posts creates a choker chicane that only one car can go through at a time. Those are the types of things that are in our traffic calming policy, the chokers and the chicanes and the speed cushions and speed bumps. And we'd like to roll that out. The problem is the process and the data that we have. So we have a bit of a conundrum here because we certainly support the principles of slowing cars down to making our streets walkable and safer. And Cook Drive is just kind of unique. It's an anomaly. Density, it's near high school, lots of pedestrians, probably not more than anywhere else in the community, but it's quite interesting. So I support the notion. I don't know if it's a community safety zone. I think 40 is probably a quick fix, not quick fix, but a quick, simple solution. And then also look at some of the other low cost solutions that are in the traffic calming policy. Like we mentioned, the chicanes and the chokers and the bump outs and that type of thing. Very much like to see that as well. So it's tricky. I don't know about if the emotional signage are as effective. Signage doesn't seem to be that effective in terms of traffic calming. As I've said before, the number one determination of speed is lane width. And all of our streets are nice, big and nice and wide because we got lots of snow and that narrows it down in the wintertime, but in the summertime, we have big wide roads and people go fast and the speed limit's 50, and in many places that's not appropriate. So it's tricky. It's a very complicated issue, and I just don't know if the community safety zone is the right answer at this time. So thank you. Kind of all over the place there. Apologize.
Thank you, Councillor Main. Councillor Gordon.
Thanks. So, each councillor has brought up some good points here. I mean, one, I'd like to see Mr. Campbell maybe consider moving that sign to mid-street rather than at the curve. I think you can see how placing it at a rather sharp curve, almost a 90-degree, could be giving us underrepresenting the real speeds of people traveling along the street. You know where it's at right now, right? So that's just maybe a suggestion. I'm not a traffic guy, but just common sense is hitting me. Like, I slow down for a curve, even if I'm giving her all the way down the street. So just a thought for what it's worth, because I'd like to see the metrics continue. The other thing is that makes this neighborhood, aside from that density that is now and is going to continue as Right Drive finishes building out, and I'm totally cool with expanding this to Right Drive, is that there's a playground on this street. You don't see me pitching Dominion where I live between Old Penetang and Woodland, which is also a racetrack and a bypass for Hugo, because right now it doesn't make sense. I mean, to Mr. Campbell's point, every street would qualify if you're going to use that, but there's a kids' playground and the super mailboxes for this whole neighborhood are right there and right smack in the center. And it's such a short street that is being used as a bypass, as a quick way to avoid 93. So I think there's a lot of uniqueness about this tiny little development that is warranted of something. The doubling of the fines, I think, has more meat on the bones than just dropping it to 40, although I'm 100% in support of dropping it to 42 if we want to consider adding that at the same time. That even makes it more of a staggering fine. And lastly, again, this is a precursor to automated speed enforcement, which is a conversation a lot of communities are having, and I think is one deserving of conversation next term. This is a hint to anyone who gets elected. And you need to have these community safety zones or school zones. Clearly, we can't just build schools, but we can apply community safety zones liberally throughout the community so that 2 or 3 cameras that we might invest in can be moved with the requisite notice to any of these locations, and people don't really know when it's there. And there's a whole other conversation about whether that works and if it's effective or just another tax. But I'd really, for today, even if we're not going with the emotional signage, although I think it'd be an awesome pilot to just buy one of these little kids in the center of the street and just try it out. Some kind of device in the center line for what's left of this season before we have to pull it for snow removal. And this community safety zone, I think, would go a long way. Not only help staff to try out new things, but also would be really meaningful to the folks in that very rather unique community that is under construction right now. Like, I don't know that I can pitch this any greater than I've already done. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gordon. Councillor Cunningham. And then I have Councillor McGinn.
Yes, thank you. It's interesting to see this motion kind of being thought about on the fly here. It doesn't feel like it was quite ready for council yet. There's multiple layers to it. Some information missing, of course. The main thing that I would like to say that hasn't yet been said is, in a perfect world, we're all perfectly focused on our driving, and we're all 28 years old with 2 children, so we're all mature in how we drive, and we don't get distracted at all, so that when we look up and see a child smack dab in front of us, we don't rear off the road and smash into somebody's car, house, living room window. I worry about the emotional signage, because the shock value is the only thing that will slow you down once you get used to it. You know that the kid's in the middle of the road and it's kind of funny. I could see a game coming up around that, but the shock value is still there for people just starting down that road. So if there's any, they changed the station on the radio and looked up and thought they were going to hit a child, I'm not so sure I would like to see that. I would not vote in favor of the emotional signage in the middle of the road. I have seen in Severn, they have that silhouette at the side of the road, about 1.5 feet back. So it looks like a child is getting ready to cross the road. It's a reminder that there are children in the neighborhood. That, not creating trauma, I could potentially see us doing, but I wouldn't support this motion with that. I think that as well, I think everybody has talked about the dilution. Councillor Gordon, I think the idea of community safety zones tied with that automated billing ticketing is potential for the future, that when this is fully fleshed out would be a valuable thing to see. And so the motion as it stands isn't quite what was discussed here this evening. I think the reduced speed limit, the ability to really scale that back into a simple motion that we could do in the interim while we're waiting for more data to come in might be appropriate, but I'm not sure exactly what that wording would look like if there was a motion to amend or even refer.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McGinn.
After I put up my request to speak, Councillor Gordon brought up the fact that there's a park. And so thank you very much. I was going to speak to that there is a park and there are young children that live in the neighborhood. So they do, to Councillor Cunningham's point, do dart across the road. Some of them are young. And I know of one family where one of the children and parents were there and they talk about being there, ran out, and they were fine. Nobody was hurt. But they did, run out, stop. And, it was like, oh, there's a car there. And that happens everywhere. So I'm not saying that it's only specific to Cook Drive, but because there's a park, children sometimes get excited. So it needs to be considered that around these areas, just like around schools, that there are going to be children present. And as for the emotional signage, I think an emotional sign on the side of the road is absolutely fantastic. I ride a motorcycle, and there's emotional things that simply happen that most car drivers are not going to see. And it is my responsibility, if you will see an animal on the road, I'm going to actually know whether it's a pet or not. So you have to, when you're in a vehicle, be aware that something emotional could happen anyway. That a child could potentially run onto the road, that a pet could potentially come across your tracks. So I'm not against an emotional sign. I would hope that the majority of people who are driving are going to remain calm and have the skills to remain calm. Would I prefer it on the side of the road? Yes, I would prefer it on the side of the road, just simply because there's a lot going on Cook Drive right now. As we know, cars park on the side. There's construction going on. So I would prefer if it was on the side of the road. I do support it becoming a community safety zone. And if I were on council, I would be okay with having a conversation if people bring it forward and they're feeling that their community and the residents in it and the children in it deserve for it to be a community safety zone. If the fines are going to, well, the fines would be more if the driver is caught. So the second part to this is that right now, yes, I love the idea. And those machines that we saw at AMO, absolutely fantastic. It's not on the floor right now. But if we do put it as a community safety zone, yes, it is a deterrent. And it becomes a sign. And there are some people that will be aware of that. So I do support it. I just don't want the sign in the middle of the road.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other individuals wishing to speak to this? Councillor Downer, please.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I attended that meeting on the speeding issue. I went up about 40 minutes early and sat in my vehicle on the street. And I did witness some vehicles going through there using that as a shortcut to Yonge Street. And I thought was at a very high rate of speed. I witnessed it myself. Now, I'm not a traffic expert either, but I do know I live on a busy street. I live on 4th Street. I know that speeding is a problem, not only on Cook Street, it's on a lot of streets in Midland. I would say that they have a valid, they're valid in their request for a community safety zone, and also to have the speed limit lowered to 40. I think that's 50 is too fast to go through that area.
Yeah.
And I will support this. I will support this motion. So that's where I stand on it.
So Counselor, are you asking for an amendment to the motion to reduce the speed to 40?
I would like to see that.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, can you revise? I guess I guess there was a suggestion also that we consider Wright Drive as well, as it's just right adjacent within the same subdivision. Is it council's wish in the amendment to include Wright Drive as well as reducing the speed to 40? I'm seeing a lot of heads nodded here. Madam Clerk, would you amend the motion accordingly? And the other thing that's missing from this motion is the amending of the bylaw. So the motion would then take the speed limit to 40, include Wright Drive, and then amend the existing traffic bylaw 2020-65, which schedule 9, which deals with community safety zone, and that's what would set up the community safety zone. But it needs to be in the motion. Is the mover and the seconder okay with that going in? Councilor Gordon.
Yes, absolutely. And just to, make this a bit more palatable for my peers, compromise. We can pull my emotional signage thing. I will leave it to the staff to determine whether they want to put something on the side of the road or put something on the middle of the road. They don't need our direction for that. Let's just focus on the CSR, the 40-kilometer-hour reduction in the bylaw, and whatever else you guys want to do, or if you want to move that sign to get metrics from the center line or the center of the throughway, it's entirely in your hands. You don't need us to tell you how to do your job. Thank
So
you.
you're looking to have the silhouette, safety silhouette slides
Strike that out.
removed as well.
Yeah.
Madam Clerk, can you?
Only because I think there's some people on council, some of my peers that are uncomfortable with that. I'd rather see it on the side, whatever. I don't want to jam this. I don't want to mess this up. This is really important. So if that's going to, cause people problems to support this, then let's just remove it and deal with the two main components. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. We'll wait for the amended motion. I have driven through Bass Lake. It was quite an eye opener. I mean, you basically are watching for traffic coming the other way, and then it's like who stares who down at the right of way. That part of it, I think there's something missing there. But other than that, it slows everybody right now. Interesting name though, chicanery.
Your worship, I have the wording for the amended motion. Would you like me to read it?
Yes, please.
That council approve a community safety zone for Cook Drive and Wright Drive, and that the speed limit be reduced to 40 kilometers an hour along Cook Drive and Wright Drive, and that Schedule 9 and Schedule 12 of Traffic Bylaw 2020-65 be amended accordingly.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. You're satisfied with that, Councilor Gordon? And I'm sorry, it was seconded by Councilor Shevsky. You're satisfied, Councilor Shevsky. So we have an amended motion on the floor. We have an amended motion on the floor. You've heard the clerk read the motion. Comments or questions before I call the question? Never mind the little kids. Let's focus on the town business. Yeah. Cute, aren't they? Yeah. So you've heard the motion. Comments or questions? Seeing none, all in favor? That carries. Second motion on the floor is notice of motion, rather, beg your pardon, is from Councilor Gordon again. And it's the one dealing with the briefing on AMO. You say you wish to withdraw that? Madam Clerk, we just pull it. Thank you. And finally, under notices of motion, again, Councillor Gordon, this has to do with the Amber Alert, I'm sorry, beg pardon, Amber Alert, and a variation of the same, which is, the name escapes me. So what I'll do is I'll read the motion in, and then we can have a conversation. So the motion is, whereas the Ontario Amber Alert is a warning system that quickly alerts the public of a suspected abduction of children who are in imminent danger, and whereas the goal is to broadcast as much information about the child, the abductor, and suspect vehicles as quickly as possible, so that the public can respond with any relevant information that might lead to the child's safe return. And whereas people are encouraged to share the Amber Alert with as many people as possible, if a child or vulnerable person is abducted, spreading the information quickly is critical to their safe return. And whereas an Amber Alert makes the public aware to keep an eye out for the child, vulnerable person, suspect, and the vehicle described in the alert. If they spot them, try to gather as many details as they can, including the specific location, where they saw them, the time, the direction they were traveling, and any other identifying details that will help to locate them. And whereas the Amber Alert gives citizens instructions to call 911 or the phone number included in the alert immediately, if they have a trip or sighting related to an Amber Alert, an Amber Alert will only be activated if the police have confirmed that an abduction has taken place, and there is reason to believe the victim is in danger of serious physical injury, and there is information available that, if broadcast to the public, could assist in the safe recovery of the victim. And whereas it is essential to remember that an Amber Alert is not always appropriate in every circumstance, and that their continued effectiveness depends on ensuring that they are only used in the cases that meet the above criteria. And whereas the tragic death of 11-year-old Draven Graham showed that the Amber Alert system is flawed when it comes to vulnerable children who can go missing but are not abducted. And whereas at the time this motion was written, there have been almost 75,000, citizens who have signed a petition on change.org requesting that a Draven Alert be created. And whereas it's clear, that there needs to be an addition to the alert system to allow for law enforcement to send out an alert for vulnerable children who go missing under circumstances that do not involve an abduction but are at serious risk of injury or death. Therefore, be it resolved that the town of Midland and its council endorse the following. 1, that the Minister of the Solicitor General and the Commissioner of the Ontario Provincial Police, as well as the Premier's office, be requested to make the necessary changes to the Amber Alert system and create a new alert called the Draven Alert, which will protect vulnerable children who have not been abducted but are at high risk of danger, injury, or death, and alert the public that they are missing. That this motion be sent to all Ontario municipalities across Ontario and the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, AMO, for endorsement. Do I have a seconder for this motion? Councillor Shefsky, thank you. And Councillor Gordon.
Thank you, and I apologize for the wordiness. You know, I like to be brief. That I can't take credit for this wording. This is, and the clerk, thank goodness, I forwarded on the original Brighton one, and this has been making the rounds. Our neighboring municipalities, I believe Tay, I'm not sure about Tiny yet, have been signing on to this endorsement, adding our voice to the chorus. Okay, so that's and Penetang fantastic. So I didn't want us to be left out of this. I don't mind being a follower rather than a leader in this capacity. I think this is a well thought out request. And quite frankly, the mayor did a great job at arguing the rationale behind it in the wording. So I don't have much more to say other than I'm looking for this council's support to add our voice to that chorus.
Thank you, Councillor. Comments or questions with respect to the motion? Councillor Main.
Just a quick comment. There was an incident in, I think it was Bancroft, where there was a teacher and she left one of her students, her child in the car, and it died. And at schools, we have a safe arrival system. Many schools have that if your kid doesn't go to school. It reminded me, this Draven Alert reminded me of something like that, if they could use that system for preschools or daycares, because these types of alerts are invaluable. And so I think very supportive of the Draven alert to try to address some holes or gaps in the existing system. And there's even potential to even look at other systems, safe arrival systems for preschools and things like that. Just because, I mean, every preventable death is a death worth preventing. So kudos on this initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Further comments or questions before I call the vote? Seeing none, I would be happy to support our neighboring municipalities and this motion put forward by Councillor Gordon. All those in favor? Thank you. That carries. Any against? Don't see any. So that carries. Thank you very much, Councillor Gordon. Councillor Shevsky. With that, we move to bylaws. So bylaw, where are we here? I have a motion. The following, moved by Councillor Prost, second by Councillor Downer, that the following bylaws rather, bylaw 2022-47, amend parking fees in bylaw 2021-24, and bylaw 2022-48, establish and appoint a joint compliance audit committee for the 2022 to 2026 council term, and repeal bylaw 2018-60 be passed and enacted. Any comments or questions with respect to the bylaws? Councillor Gordon.
Just a minor procedural one. Councillor Prost is not with us right now. She's with us in spirit, but
Very good, thank you. Deputy Mayor Ross. Thank you very much. So that was now moved by Deputy Mayor Ross. So any other comments or questions with respect to this motion? Seeing none, all in favor? Thank you. Somehow I've lost my camera. There we go. And finally, nope, two more. We have moved by Deputy Mayor Ross, second by Councillor Gordon, that bylaw 2022-49, being a bylaw to adopt the proceedings of the regular council meeting held September 7th, 2022, be passed and enacted. Comments or questions on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor? Thank you very much. That carries. And the motion of the evening, moved by Councillor Downer, seconded by Councillor McGinn, that this regular meeting of council adjourn at 8:34 p.m. All those in favor?
Yes, good night.
Thank you, Councillor McGinn.
Right.